Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Newark Museum of Art's Community Day Zoopalooza, presented by Horizon Foundation for New Jersey. Thank you for joining us for this program with Turtleback Zoo. There's more programming coming up later today, which I'll tell you about at the end of this session. So if you are watching on Zoom, you can drop questions and comments in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And if you need closed captioning, you can access that at the bottom of your screen as well. And if you're watching on Facebook, please write your questions in the comment box below and we can get to those as well. So we are very excited to have our friends Jillian and Julia from Turtleback Zoo joining us today. We are going to all work together to learn more about animals in their habitats. So let's go ahead and get started because I want to spend as much time checking out the animals at Turtleback Zoo as possible with you today. So I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. All right, so we are going to be talking about animal habitats today. So what is a habitat? A habitat is the place where an animal makes its home. The habitat has to provide food, water, and shelter for the animal. And there are many different types of habitats around the world. So for today's program, we are going to be exploring 3 habitats around the world, and we're going to be meeting some animal friends from those habitats and find out more about the places that they live and how they adapt to those areas. The first one we're going to learn about is a rainforest habitat. So a rainforest is an area of tall, mostly evergreen trees that gets a high amount of rainfall every year. Rainforests are incredibly diverse and are Earth's oldest living ecosystems. But they cover only 6% of the planet's surface, and they're home to more than half of the world's plant and animal species. So rainforests, even though they aren't very numerous, it is not a very large habitat around the world, it is actually a very important habitat for the health of our planet. So if we take a look at an artist's rendering of a rainforest, this is one example that we have at the museum currently on display. This is Martin Johnson Head's Catalea orchid with 2 hummingbirds. So if you look closely, you can see both a male and female hummingbird. The male is the one with red underneath its chin. The female is the one without the red underneath its chin. You can see the orchid that they are sitting next to, but look at the trees behind. Those might not look like the trees that we see here in New Jersey because New Jersey is not part of a rainforest habitat. So we need to travel to another location on the earth to experience what a rainforest habitat is like. But our friends at Turtleback Zoo have some animals from the rainforest. So what we're going to do is I'm going to stop my share and we're going to turn it over to Turtleback Zoo to show us some of our animal friends from the rainforest. So Turtleback Zoo, if you want to come on, there we are. Let's highlight your screen.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, are we unmuted? Perfect. All right, guys. So here I have a first rainforest animal, and this is a giant African millipede. So let me turn so you can view this slide. Inches long, but I believe they can grow up to 10 inches. And they live in rainforests. So they live in very humid environments. And they're also herbivores. So they will eat things like, here at the zoo, we feed them things like sweet potatoes, lettuce, but in their normal habitat, they will eat things like grasses, leaves, and things like that. And you can see those legs. So they're called millipedes because they're said to have 1,000 legs, but in reality, they have about 300 to 400. So it just looks like they have a ton. And as he moves along my hand, you can see the way that his legs move. It kind of looks like a wave as he moves. And these guys are great decomposers. So they'll eat things that are kind of already starting to decompose. And as they kind of absorb them and excrete them, it kind of helps make soil in the rainforest. So great decomposers, and they're very important for nutrient recycling in the rainforest. And you can see those antennae up top. That's how he kind of senses his environment. And he uses this dark color to help him blend in with that soil on the rainforest floor. And you can see see once he fully stretches out, he's about the length of my two hands side by side. Any quick questions before we move on?
Yes, we do have some questions here. First question is, what is a millipede's favorite color? So are they drawn to one color as opposed to another?
I don't believe they are, but that is a great observation question. I don't believe they are kind of attracted to a certain color in particular. Develop their environment is through those antennae. So they will so much colors. So they're just more going to sense what's in front of them. And it's going to be very basic kind of senses like that.
All right, so your internet's breaking up a little bit, so let me repeat. So the antenna, everybody, that you see wiggling in front, that's the face of the millipede. So they use that antenna to feel their way around their environment. So why do they have so many legs?
That is a great question. Honestly, it's just the way that they've kind of evolved over time. And the more legs they have, I guess the faster they can move. And also too, the longer they grow, the more legs they will also have. But their legs, it's just kind of throughout evolution, they've evolved to have that many legs and to move them in that sequential pattern. As you can see, as he walks along my hand, it kind of moves in like a wave-like pattern.
That's amazing. What are those little spots on your hand? You see little pieces of what looks like dirt?
Oh yeah, so he was currently in a little kind of moist dirt environment. So as I kind of pick him up to handle him, some of that dirt kind of just gets trapped in his legs. So you're just seeing dirt on my hands.
Okay. And can millipedes have babies?
Yes, actually, they can. So they lay eggs, and as the eggs hatch, so kind of they're just baby millipedes, and they'll grow throughout their lifetime to about a full 10 inches.
So about 10 inches long. That's good. Let's see. We have another question. Do we know how old our millipede friend is?
This millipede, actually, I don't know how old he is, but they can likely live for a year, possibly a little bit more, especially in a captive environment. They can definitely live up to like 5 years or so.
All right. Can they change color?
No, they will not change color. So I believe once they're born, they probably will be a little bit softer and possibly a little bit lighter. But once they kind of mature, they're going to be this brown color for the rest of their life. And they also actually, I know you guys can't feel him, but if you look closely at his exoskeleton, you'll see he has segments. And those segments are actually pretty tough when I feel them. They're not as tough as my fingernail, but they are of like a similar material and a similar texture.
Right. So you said exoskeleton. Do they have a shell?
They do not have a shell like a turtle. So if you guys think shell and you think turtle or maybe clam, it's not going to be a protective structure like that. An exoskeleton is more, if you guys have ever seen a crayfish, that's kind of an exoskeleton. So it is a little bit less strong of a material, but it's still their protective kind of covering. So they don't have bones. Like our bones protect our internal organs and they help support our entire body. These guys have that support system on the outside called an exoskeleton. So that kind of just helps protect his entire structure and form.
All right.
As a shell.
Okay, and we do have some people who are asking a same question that you answered at the beginning, but they may have joined a little bit later. Can you tell us again how many legs a millipede actually has?
So they have around 300 to 400, but again, the longer they are, the more legs they're going to have. But even though his name is a little bit deceiving, Milla usually means 1,000, they have only about a couple hundred.
Fantastic. So do we have another friend that we can compare the millipede to, who's also from the rainforest?
Yes, so Miss Jill is actually going to show you another rainforest animal. Great questions, guys.
So right here, what we're looking at is a Madagascar hissing cockroach. So just like the millipede, they also have this exoskeleton. So you can see there's just a little different. There's just kind of a lighter color. It's a bit of a lighter brown, kind of almost a tan color. And they use that so they can camouflage into the rainforest floor. So just like the millipedes, they also are really great decomposers. So they'll eat things that are kind of breaking down, and then through themselves they'll kind of repurpose it, and it'll become incredible soil, and it's really good for the environment and the ecosystem. We often don't essential to the sea. They also have antennae around, and their eyesight's not the best. So their antennas are extremely important, so they can figure out what they're feeling and where they're. So they have 6 legs. You can kind of see they're a little hard to
Whoop.
Hi, guys.
Uh-oh. Oh, there we go.
Can you guys hear us and see us now?
Yes, we can hear and see you better now.
You guys cut out for a second. Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. So can you repeat what you were saying about the antenna on the cockroach? Because we were cutting out a little bit there.
Yeah, so the antennas, they use them so they can feel what's around them. So they don't have the greatest eyesight, so their antennas are really important so they know kind of where they're walking and what they're crawling on. So
Perfect.
these snakes would, and that's kind of one of their defenses, because if an animal is kind of walking around them, they're going to hear this hissing noise, and that animal is going to be a little terrified, because usually snakes are kind of thought of animals that other animals like to stay away from. So this cockroach is kind of going to act like a snake, and it's going to be really good defense for them.
Okay, wonderful. Can we take some questions now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So questions that deal with both the cockroach and the millipede. Can we tell the gender? Can we tell if it's a boy or a girl?
So that is actually really tough. So for these guys, the way we can tell the gender on the cockroaches is they have little bumps on their heads. So it's a little tough to tell here from the camera angle. But if it's a male, they're going to have these big bumps on the top of their head. And that's how we're able to tell if it's a male or a female.
And then for the millipede, can we tell the gender of the millipede if it's a male or female?
Those ones we can't really tell. That's just whether they lay eggs or not.
Okay. Oh, perfect. So that brings us into our next question. When we talk about laying eggs, what do the babies of the millipedes or the cockroaches look like?
So they're kind of just like smaller versions of what the grown-ups look like, but they are a lot softer. Their exoskeleton hasn't fully developed when they're babies yet. So they're softer and their color's a little bit lighter just because their outside covering their exoskeleton isn't fully there yet.
Wonderful. Do either of them bite?
So we like to say anything with a mouth does bite. So they bite their food and everything like that, but they don't really bite anything else other than that. But they do have a mouth, so they are capable of biting.
Right. Does the millipede or the cockroach have a favorite thing to eat?
So they really like sweet potatoes a lot, both of them. That's kind of their favorite food there. They like to eat that, and then they'll eat a lot of lettuce as well. So they're big vegetable eaters.
Wonderful. And do we happen to know the ages of our friends here from the rainforest?
We do not know the ages.
Okay. All right. Last question for our friends here from the rainforest. Do either of them have a tail?
So they don't really have a tail. You can see there's no tail really there. So they're not going to have a tail. I mean, they obviously do have a backside, but there is no a tail.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so let's say goodbye to our friends from the rainforest. What we're going to do is we're going to learn about our next habitat, and I'm going to allow you a couple minutes to get our animal friend from that habitat ready. So I'm going to go back and continue sharing my screen for our presentation. There we go. So let's go forward. So now we are going to talk about a desert habitat. So we go from the rainforest where we get a ton of rain to a desert where we barely get any over the course of the year. So deserts are areas on Earth that are extremely dry and very little rain falls over the course of the year. Deserts can be either very hot during the day and cold at night, or they can be cold all the time. So when we tend to think about a desert, we might tend to think about hot deserts, but there are actually cold deserts as well. And the most famous cold desert is actually Antarctica. It's actually the largest desert in the world. Now, you might not think that Antarctica would be a desert because it's covered with snow and ice. But since very little rain or snow falls there over the course of a year, Antarctica is actually the largest desert in the world, but it is a cold desert. But we are going to be meeting an animal friend from a warmer desert. We're not going to meet one from Antarctica, unfortunately, because even though it is still winter for some of us, we're not going to meet any wintertime animals today. So I want to show you a picture that we have at the museum that shows an animal in its desert habitat. So if you look at this painting by William Robinson Lee, it's called the Grand Canyon. It was painted in 1911. Some of you may have been to the Grand Canyon. Some of you might be from that area of the US where it's very dry. We have beautiful rocks. But if you look to the right part of our picture here, over in this area, if you can see my cursor, we do have an animal there. So this is one of the bighorn sheep that live in that area. And this animal has to find its food, its water, and its shelter in this sort of harsh environment. So it has to adapt to this environment. It has to find ways to survive. So we are going to meet an animal from this area of the United States that has to adapt to its surroundings so that it can survive as well. So, let me click forward here one more time. There we go. So we are going to turn it back to our friends from Turtleback Zoo, and we're going to meet an animal friend from the desert. So I'm going to stop my share. We're going to make their screen really big and beautiful. There we go.
Hi, everyone. So I'm here with our blue-tongued skink, and you'll see why he's called a blue-tongued skink if he sticks his tongue out for you. But if you can tell, his tongue is blue, and there it is. He just flashed it for us. So his tongue is blue, and that's actually a great adaptation because in nature, a lot of animals that are brightly colored are typically poisonous. So for example, if you guys think of poison dart frogs, they're very bright colors like bright orange, bright green, bright blue. And so if a predator sees those bright colors, they typically know to stay away from them. So even though our skink here isn't poisonous, by having that brightly colored tongue, a lot of predators will still avoid him, just in case. And you could see too, he has very short limbs and a very long body. And also, if he's ever stressed or scared, he can kind of hiss like a snake. So by having those short limbs and this long body and making that noise, a lot of predators too that are chasing him may actually think that he's a snake and again avoid him. So those are just a few adaptations that our skink has to keep him safe in nature. He is also a desert animal, so his flat body and his little claws, if you can kind of get a close look there, will help him dig through the dirt and the sand and help him kind of hide under rocks. If you turn sideways too, do you see that hole on the side of his head? Those are actually his ears. So we have external ears that you could kind of see from the outside of our body and internal ears that help us kind of filter that sound. But a lot of reptiles only have those internal ears. So they're typically just a hole on the side of their head, but he could still hear sounds and things like that. You guys can get a good look at his claws. And he also has a long tail. Do you guys have any questions about him?
Oh, yes, we do. We have a lot. First question we want to ask is this blue-tongued skink, is it a powerful animal? Because it looks very muscular.
He does look very muscular, but he's muscular, but he's not super powerful. His body shape is more to kind of make him look like a snake and to kind of help him slither around and dig. So that's really where his power kind of comes in. But he's not a super fast runner or a super scary predator like that. But he will eat smaller things like bugs, insects, and things like that.
All right. Do they have a favorite food that you feed them at the zoo?
Here he gets a lot of crickets, and he definitely loves his crickets.
Right. Does he have a name?
Yes, his name is Cuervo.
Turbo.
Cuervo, yes.
Oh, Cuervo. Okay. I was like Turbo, but he's not fast. So Cuervo, nice to meet you. Fantastic. Are blue-tongued skinks poisonous?
Good question. So even though they can mimic some poisonous things, they themselves are actually not poisonous.
Wow. Do we know how long they live?
Actually, off the top of my head, I do not know the answer to that. I believe it is up there in the few years though, but off the top of my head, I do not know how long.
Do we know how old this one is?
I do not know how old Cuervo is, but actually,
Oh.
Jill, help me out. They can live about 13 to 15 years or so.
Okay. Since you gave it a name, can we tell whether it's a boy or a girl?
So with a lot of reptiles, you actually can't tell the way you would tell on like a human or another mammal. So for reptiles, what you would kind of have to do is you have to take a blood sample or just wait and see if they lay eggs.
Oh, so like other reptiles, the blue-tongued skink lays eggs to have babies.
Yes.
Oh, excellent. Let's see. Do we know what specific desert this blue-tongued skink comes from?
I think he's from a variety of different deserts, but he typically lives in Australian deserts.
Australian desert, nice. Is there a reason that its tongue is blue? That might be from someone who joined us a little bit late. Can you tell us about that blue tongue, why it's so important?
So bright colors in nature typically mean that an animal is poisonous, but a lot of animals also mimic poisonous animals. So in Cuervo, his bright blue tongue is actually just him mimicking things that are poisonous. So it just kind of warns predators to kind of stay away from him in case he is poisonous, even though we know he's not.
Right. And I know you mentioned that he's very powerful, but he doesn't, he's very muscular, but he's not very powerful. How fast are these animals?
He can go pretty quickly when he wants to, but he typically lounges because remember, he is cold-blooded, so he'll kind of be lounging in the sun to warm himself up. But if he needs to kind of catch a quick cricket or something like that, he can kind of jump out and have spurts of pretty fast speeds.
Very cool. Someone is asking, what is the black thing on its skin? So can you show us more of the top and the back part of the body so we can see the patterns?
So can you see his pattern? So he actually has, if you look closely, you could get a good look at his scales. So most reptiles, all reptiles actually will have scales along their body, and he will shed his scales, not in one piece like a snake, but he will shed as he grows and kind of ages a little bit more. But the patterning actually is pretty much just his camouflage. So again, because he lives in like a desert environment, that kind of sandy pattern will help him blend into the sand and the rocks that are in his habitat.
Perfect. So two questions that can kind of go together. So we say that he's cold-blooded. Why does a cold-blooded animal live in a warm environment? Can you explain a little bit more about what it means to be cold-blooded?
Sure. So cold-blooded means that they can't regulate their internal body temperature in the way that we can. So our body naturally will sense like, oh, if it's cold out, like we're at a constant internal temperature of 98 degrees. But a cold-blooded animal cannot actually do that. So their body temperature is actually determined by their environment. So if they go into a shady area, their internal temperature is going to cool down. But if they sit out in the sun, it's going to warm up. So they will naturally kind of, through instinct, just sense if their body temperature is dropping, they need to go into the sunlight. Or if their body temperature is getting too hot, they will naturally kind of go into the shade.
Right. And is that true of most reptiles? Do most of them do that?
Yes, that is true of, I believe all reptiles. Pretty much all reptiles will be cold-blooded, so they will exhibit that behavior.
Okay. If it's injured or if it's attacked, can it detach its tail and then grow a new one?
That's a great question, actually. So yes, he actually can. He is one of the few lizard species that can do that. So if he is threatened by a predator, he will quickly just drop his tail. He'll drop it about right here behind his hind legs, and it will kind of slither away, and it will kind of just move a little bit very quickly. And so it gives him time to distract the predator so that he has time to kind of escape. And over the course of like maybe a few months or so, his tail will eventually grow back. But it does take a while, and he tries to kind of use other deterrents like his tongue and like the hissing so that he doesn't have to do that, because that is a costly process. But if he really needs to, if something grabs onto his tail, he can quickly drop it. And that process is called autotomy. It's a great question.
Yes, absolutely. Can you tell us how much he weighs? I mean, when you're holding him there, does he feel heavy? Does he feel light?
He does. He is a little bit heavy. I'd say he's about maybe 3 to 5 pounds, but he's not super heavy at all.
Okay. And someone asked, what is a skink? So can you go into a little more detail about why this is a special reptile?
Yeah, so if you think of typical lizards, like a bearded dragon or something like that, they kind of have longer limbs and more slender bodies. A skink is a lizard species that has a different morphology. So a skink's morphology is kind of going to be a little bit flatter to the ground, a little bit wider on top, and they tend to have shorter limbs.
Okay, very good. And can we see its tummy? Can we see from underneath maybe a little bit, or is that a little too difficult? Oh, there we go. You see a little bit.
A little bit.
We notice a different color there. Is there a reason for that?
So his tummy tends to be a little bit lighter, and because it's very flat to the floor, so he really doesn't need to have that camouflaging color pattern on his stomach because his stomach isn't really exposed to the outside world as much. If he's laying flat on the ground like this, it's really going to be his tummy that's hitting the ground, so nothing's going to really see his stomach. So that's why it's a bit of a lighter color. It's a little bit pinker, and pretty white, and not as patterned.
Okay. And is our friend a rescue?
I'm actually not quite sure. Jill, do you know?
Well, all of our animals that we have here at the zoo, they were either born here or we get them from other zoos. So we don't take them out of the wild. We either get them from certain programs or like people who work with animals to make sure that they're safely transferred and everything like that. So in a way, he is a rescue.
He could have also been a pet that someone didn't want. That's also common with a lot of our turtles here.
Yeah, that's unfortunately a story where people, they like exotic animals, but then they don't realize how much difficulty it is to take care of one, and then they realize that they can't. So it's always good to be smart about the kind of animals that we are having in our own homes and not getting one that we can't take care of.
Exactly.
Other questions we have that kind of repeat. So can you go really quickly? What favorite foods this animal likes to eat?
So he likes bugs and things like that. His favorites here at the zoo are crickets.
Crickets. Okay. Does he eat them when they're alive, or are they already passed on crickets?
Nope, he actually eats them alive. So he'll put his crickets in there and he'll quickly kind of wait, and then he'll jump at them and grab them with his tongue.
Right. So we've seen the blue tongue. Does it have teeth?
I believe he does have teeth, but they're not sharp and they're not long. They're in there in his mouth, but they're not very essential to his diet. He's not going to be really gripping anything like a big predator like a wolf will be.
Okay, wonderful. So the final question we have, and this is a really important one because we can liken this to dealing with wild animals. Why are you wearing gloves?
Great question. So now, obviously, it's coronavirus. So because there's still a lot that we don't know about the virus, we're just taking extra precautions when handling him. So we're using gloves because we can have harmful substances on our skin, like hand sanitizer, lotion, soap residue, things like that. So just for the safety of the animal, we want to wear gloves when we handle him, just because we don't want anything that we have on our hands to harm him. And in other cases too, it really depends on the animal. Sometimes animals can be prickly, so we'll have to wear thicker gloves. Other times an animal may secrete substances. So again, the gloves are just for his protection and for our protection.
Right. And you mentioned that this animal is native to Australia, so we wouldn't necessarily see this animal in our own backyard. But should we, if we see an animal in our own backyard that's a wild animal, should we run out and pick it up?
Great question. We definitely should not. Because one, animals already have their homes in nature. We don't want to disturb them, and we don't want to move them from their environment. So no, and also too, sometimes an animal can be dangerous. So for their safety and well-being, we just want to leave them alone, let them do their thing in their natural habitat.
All right, that's very good advice.
The animal looks injured or unwell, you can always call somebody who's been trained to handle it, like animal control, things like that.
That's excellent, excellent advice. Okay, so what I'm going to let you do is take our friend, put them back into their habitat, and we're going to move on to our next animal habitat. And let's go back to our slideshow here. The last habitat we are going to be looking at today is the habitat that we are here in New Jersey, the one that's in our backyard for the entire state. Even if you live in an area that has a lot of buildings and a lot of highways and stuff, you're still inside of the North American forest habitat. So this stretches from the northern part of the US up into Canada, all the way down to Florida, goes all the way out to the Mississippi and Missouri rivers. So the North American forest habitat is a big forest habitat, but it's a type of temperate forest, and temperate forests are found all over the world. And temperate forests are always changing and are one of the world's major habitats. So about 25% of the surface of the earth is covered by a temperate forest habitat. So these temperate forests are regions with high levels of rain and humidity, and normally have a variety of deciduous trees. So here in New Jersey, we have two different types of trees. We have deciduous and we have coniferous. Deciduous trees, if you look outside right now, since we're at the tail end of winter, beginning of spring, deciduous trees are the trees that you see outside that have lost their leaves in the winter. Coniferous trees are the ones that are like the pine trees, where we see the pine needles, they have pine cones on them. We normally see them green throughout most of the winter. So a North American temperate forest habitat tends to have deciduous trees, but here in New Jersey, we actually have areas that have both types of trees here. So if we were to look at a piece of art from the museum that represents a North American forest habitat, we would look at George Inness's The Trout Brook, which is painted in 1891. So when we look at this piece, notice that it doesn't look like a photograph that you would take maybe with your smartphone or with a digital camera. We don't see any clear detail. It's very hazy, very misty. So the artist might have wanted to catch this feeling of kind of being in a very sort of hazy, misty forest where it might not be easy to see the animals. But if you look down towards the bottom of the painting right here, we can see part of that trout brook, part of that river that flows through this forest. So even though we might not be able to see any big animals here, these kind of forests are teeming with life. Some of it a good size, others are a little bit smaller. And so for our friends at Turtleback Zoo, we are going to get to compare two animals that are from this kind of habitat that might look similar to each other, but actually have some different adaptations that help them to live their best lives. So what we're going to do is I'm going to stop my share one final time here. We're going to go back to our friends at Turtleback Zoo, highlighting their video. And again, if you have questions, type them into the Q&A. You can put comments into the chat, but make sure you type your questions into the Q&A so we can see them, okay?
All right. So here I have an eastern box turtle. So these guys would be found here where we live, and they'd be found on kind of the floor of these forests. So you can see on their shell, they have this pattern here. They have kind of these colors that would be found in nature, right? So they have kind of these tan brown colors, maybe a little darker black colors, and they use these things to camouflage into their environment. So you'll often see them kind of hiding like rocks almost, because what's really interesting about box turtles, where they get their name from, is they can put all their body in their shell and they kind of close it up like a little box. So there's almost this tiny hinge that they have that kind of can clasp together. So they're like a box. So then when they do that, they look exactly like a rock, and they can camouflage and will be hidden. So you can see he's kind of moving around right now, trying to figure out where he is. So these guys they don't move super fast, right? Because when we think of a turtle, we kind of think of a very slow moving animal, but they're not as slow as we think. So they can move fast when they need to. If they need to kind of get away and go hide, they can move pretty quickly. And for, their size, they move quickly because they are carrying this shell on their back, right? So it's not like us. We don't have this big shell that we're trying to lug around, but these guys have this big shell that they use as protection, and their shell grows with them. So as they get bigger, their shell is going to get bigger as well. So a lot of people think that turtles and tortoises can lose their shells and grow a new one, but they cannot. So this shell will be with him his entire life. So our box turtle here is actually what we consider a tortoise. So the difference between a tortoise and a turtle is tortoises spend more time on land, and turtles can be found in the water. So you can see he has these claws, these feet that he's trying to show you right now, with these really sharp nails and claws. and he'll use those to dig into the ground. So he'll dig into like the wood chips or the dirt that he is found in to kind of not only hide, but kind of search for maybe some foods, maybe things like that. So he likes to eat a lot of salad, a lot of vegetables, and leafy greens. He also here at the zoo gets something that's specially made for him and his diet to make sure he gets all the nutrients that he would find in the wild. And something really interesting about box turtles is the way we can tell the difference between a male and a female is by their eyes. So you can see he's looking at the camera right now, and he has these really bright red eyes. So males are the ones with the bright red eyes. So that's how you can tell whether it would be a female. So do you guys have any questions?
Yeah, can we see the underside of this box turtle? Because you mentioned that it can close itself up. Can we see some sort of proof of that?
So
not forcing the turtle to close up, but
yeah, so it's not like really a hinge that we can see ourselves. It's kind of more on the inside, but you can see the pattern on the back of or the bottom of this turtle here. You can see it's kind of like the top, but it is a little bit different because you're not going to see him trying to camouflage his underside because that's what's going to be hidden mostly. It's just the top of his shell that is going to be out in nature that he's going to be using to camouflage.
all right. Do we know how long these types of turtles live and how old this one is specifically?
So I don't know the exact age of this one specifically, but turtles can live for a very long time. So when we talk about turtles and tortoises, we like to warn people because if you get them as a pet, it's not going to be something that's going to last for a few years. They're going to last for like 20 plus years. So you really need to be prepared to have this pet for a very long time.
All right, that's good advice. It's very good advice. You said that this is a he, so that means that he wouldn't be able to lay eggs. Oh, I love that point of view. That's adorable. But does this turtle have any babies?
So he himself does not, but they can have babies. The females would be having babies, but we don't have any babies here at the zoo.
Okay. And forgive me if I've asked this already. What is the turtle's name?
So his name is Mailbox.
Mailbox. I love it. Some people are asking about the colors of eyes. Why do they have red eyes? And can they hear?
So the eyes are just something that they have adapted to have that is just found in the way that they have evolved. So those bright red eyes are just an evolutionary trait that the males have. And these guys can hear. We can't see their ears, but they can still hear their surroundings.
Okay. Can you tell us what color the female's eyes are?
Yeah, so the female eyes are going to be like kind of this darker color. It's going to be kind of like a darker brownish yellowy color. So you can really be able to tell the difference because this male has this bright red.
All right. And people are finding the nails fascinating. Can you tell us a little bit more about why they have the nails and how they use them?
Yes, so as I said earlier, he's often camouflaging and kind of trying to hide. So these nails are really important to him because he'll be able to dig up a lot of dirt using them. So you can see just how sharp they are, and he'll use them to kind of dig around and dig himself a little hole that he can hide in and feel safe in.
All right. And the last question for our box turtle friend, is he a rescue? I know we asked that about our skink before.
So I don't know specifically whether or not this one is a rescue, but I would have to say most likely just because all of our animals do come either from other zoos or from people who maybe had it as a pet and just decided they didn't want it anymore and then went through special people who know what to do in that situation.
All right, perfect. So do we have another friend that is kind of like this box turtle that we can compare it to?
We do, yes. So I'm going to put the box turtle back and then I will get our other friend.
Okay, perfect. So while we're waiting for our other friend, let's ask him other questions. Is this a harmless animal? Are turtles and tortoises harmless?
So again, it depends on the species. The box turtle and also the other turtle we have for today are actually relatively harmless. They're typically prey in the wild. They will eat things like fish and insects, but they're not poisonous, they're not venomous. They're relatively harmless, yes. They're commonly found as pets too, box turtles.
Okay. And is there any animal that the box turtle and our next friend are like really afraid of?
I'd have to say birds and probably some big mammals. Anything with a strong mouth and sharp teeth can be able to crack through that shell. But typically the shell is a great source of protection for them. So they're usually protected from like king or kind of smaller animals rolling them around. But if an animal is super strong and can bite super hard, then it might be able to break through the shell.
Okay. And I remember that we were saying that the turtles can live up to about 20 years or so, but we don't know the ages of our friend box turtle there.
Yeah, so we don't know his age specifically, but they typically live 20 to 30 years, possibly even more in captivity.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are we ready to meet our next friend?
Yes.
All right.
Our next friend is a diamondback terrapin. So you can see actually right now he's kind of showing you his feet here, and you can see a little bit of the difference here. So these guys are found in more water type environments. So his feet are almost webbed because he's going to be spending time in water. So his name is Dash, and he spends time in water that's called brackish water. And what that is that's a mix of fresh water and salt water. So you can see right now, we call him Dash because he's extremely quick for a turtle. So you can see he's moving around a lot right now. So he does that because he's kind of just trying to figure out where he is. He's also a very, very good swimmer. So you can see he's showing off this leg power that he has here. So you can see his shell is significantly different from the box turtle shell. So because he spends time in water, his shell is a bit flatter, and that helps him move quicker through the water. So our box turtle had more of a domed shell, and that's better for him to camouflage as a rock, things that would be round, whereas Dash has a flat shell, so the water kind of just goes right off of him and he can move quickly. You can see he's got kind of almost these spots on his skin, and that helps him camouflage in the water because he is this kind of almost grayish blue color like the water would be. And so he can camouflage pretty well in the water. He likes to eat little fish and like little bugs that he can find in the water. So he also can use those nails to kind of maybe stir up the water and look for his food as well. So you can also see he's a little bit smaller than our box turtle. And once again, that is used to his advantage, not only to camouflage, but to swim quickly through the water and kind of move away from predators and things like that. You can see he's got a bit of a tail, and he uses that as a way to steer and kind of move around in the water. So you can see, so he has a beak. So our turtles and tortoises have like this beak, they don't really have teeth, and that's what they use to chew their food. So you can kind of see it up close. So it's pretty sharp, and that's kind of how he breaks through the food that he likes to eat, which would be like little fish and little things that he can find in the water. So you can see the color of his shell is also a little bit different as well from the box turtle. It's kind of less yellowy and it's a bit more darker, kind of this tan color. So he can look like some rocks that would be found in the water as well. The top of our turtle shells here, they're all covered in these things called scutes. And that's what kind of gives this shell its color. So turtle shells are made out of bone, and they're covered in scutes, which is what's made out of keratin. So that's what is made from our hair and our nails. So that's what covers the bone, that's the shell, and it gives it all its coloration and its pattern. So just like the box turtle shell, this shell will grow with him. He cannot take it off. So as he gets bigger, his shell will get bigger. And unlike the box turtle, he can't really close up his shell as well because he doesn't really need to hide as much as a rock would, like to look like a rock, as the box turtle would, because he's such a fast swimmer, so he's able to kind of swim away quickly.
That's all amazing facts. And I love how active Dash is. This is amazing. Are you ready for some questions?
Yes.
Okay, so first question is there any way to tell if it's male or female? You were mentioning the length of the tail. Does that have anything to do with it?
Yes, so the tail length does differ a little bit between male and females. So you can see he's got a pretty good sized tail here. If we had a female, it would be easy to tell because the size difference would be a little different. And as we mentioned previously with Cuervo as well, you can do blood tests and things like that to also tell whether it would be a male or female.
All right. Someone is asking, why do they have a pointy nose? You talked about the beak, but if we look at the face, as it comes to a point right above the beak, its nose looks really pointy. Is there a reason for that?
So that is just the way they've adapted, but it also it helps them kind of use that through the water and through like the dirt if they had to dig a little bit as well.
Okay. Do they like to sleep in the water or on the land? Because I've seen some turtles where they're underwater and only their nose is above the water. Do they like to sleep underwater or do they like to sleep on the land?
So they can sleep on both. Dash actually likes to spend time on both land and water. So usually if he's in the water, he's kind of trying to swim around, kind of relax a little bit. And then he's often found on the land when he's trying to kind of sleep.
Right. Someone is asking for you to talk again about the white and black spots that we see. Since turtles are reptiles, do they have scales?
So they don't. So scales is kind of an interesting word. So it's more of his shell that they have that is what makes him more of a reptile. So you can actually see, if you look at his skin here, it's actually pretty soft. And that's good for him in the water because if it was kind of harsh skin, it wouldn't be very easy on the water, so to say. So his coloration on his skin not only helps him camouflage, but it is really helpful for him to move throughout the water because it is kind of a softer surface for that water.
Okay, so we're going to take just a few more questions before we end for today. Is he related to a sea turtle?
So he's not like technically super close related to a sea turtle. Like all of them are in a way related, but he's not like part of the sea turtles that you would see. Like he's not like a leatherback or things like that.
All right. And talking about ages of our turtles again, does this turtle, would it have as long of a life as our box turtle, about 20 to 30 years?
Yeah, so it definitely would, especially here in captivity and under human care. They definitely would live, up to 20 to 30, even more years.
Okay. Is it faster on land or in water?
So Dash is definitely faster in water. He is fast on land, but because of his adaptations, he can definitely swim through the water fairly quickly.
Okay. And I have some people asking, can it hide in its shell? Remember, this is the kind of turtle the box turtle can. This kind of turtle cannot. It can't pull itself back into that shell. Someone's asking, again, with the idea of animals fearing other animals, do these animals have any natural predators that they would fear?
Yeah, so they're gonna fear like any larger fish, maybe some birds any pretty much animal that is bigger than them, they're gonna often fear just out of like the size difference and how scary that is. So a lot of larger birds definitely are natural predators for them.
All right. And one person is asking if we can see Dash swim. I don't think you have anything set up to allow him to swim for our site here, but maybe people can come visit the zoo?
Yeah, so Dash himself isn't an animal that's out in the zoo, so he's one of our education animals, but we do have a few sea turtles that if you guys come to the zoo, you can see.
Okay. And for the last question, can you have turtles together? Do they fight with each other?
So our box turtle actually lives in exhibit with two other box turtles. and they get along fairly well. They're all kind of friends. They kind of hang out together. Dash is the only kind of terrapin that we have. But if we had another one, we could put them together and they would get along pretty well.
All right, fantastic. So thank you so much for sharing all these animals with us today. And we're going to say goodbye to Dash for just a moment here, but I want to go ahead and thank Jillian and Julia and everybody at Turtleback Zoo, all the animals and all the staff that we have there, and all of our animal friends. That was really fantastic. I had a fun time. I know our audiences had a fun time too. Lots of really great questions that we had today as well. I encourage everybody to sign up for our final session today for more fun. That's at 4 p.m. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a second. But we want to definitely thank our friends from Turtleback Zoo. We also want to ask you to please consider donating to the Newark Museum of Art so we can continue to bring this amazing virtual programming to you. And there's going to be a link in the chat for that as well. So coming up at 4 p.m., you're going to learn how to draw two wonderful animals, both lions and elephants. You can sign up for this event on our website at newarkmuseumart.org. And you can check our social media channels for more animal content we're providing for you today. And make sure you mark your calendars for April 17th, because that's going to be our next community day, which is our Cherry Blossom Festival. So we're going to have a festival exploring the wonders of cherry blossoms with a wide variety of other activities related to spring and Japanese culture. So that's on April 17th. So that's going to end it for us for this session for today. So we will see you at 4 p.m. for our final program of the day, drawing lions and elephants with Bob Walters of Dino Art. So thank you so much, Julia and Jillian. It was so wonderful working with you today. We will see you later on, okay?
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.